So we were saying that we were going to go ahead and start by reading from our books, right?
Other than, hi, Kacen, it's good to see you.
Hi, Alex. It's really good to see you too.
It's been a couple of months, a couple of weeks, a couple of days. So it's good to get to take a little time to talk about trans kids in queer lit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, now you can read. I just wanted to, be nice. Unless
You're
you
much
want to,
nicer than
do you want to read first?
I can. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
please
can. I think
do.
we can. I can also start by saying a little bit about what Felix Ever After is about. So Felix Ever After is about 17-year-old Felix Love, who has never been in love, though he really wants to be. But he's afraid that he's one marginalization too many as a Black and queer and trans guy, and thinks that, with the world that we live in, basically, the world is basically constantly telling people like me and other marginalizations that we're just not worthy of love or not worthy of that respect. So he kind of has internalized that. He's struggling to break free of that. And the book is really his journey to his own discovery of self-love. But also, there's rom-com, it's a fun book. I don't want to say too much, but it's a fun book, I think. So, it's also about his gender identity, and he starts to question his gender identity again in the middle of his story, where he thought that he was a trans guy, and then he starts to wonder. He knows for sure that he's not his assigned gender at birth, but he starts to wonder, maybe I'm more non-binary than I thought. So I'm going to read from a scene where we see a little bit of his struggles with his father, who, though he does like all the right things on paper, isn't always the most as accepting as as Felix would like him to be. So that's just 3 pages. So I'll just start there. Okay. Felix has just gotten back home and to his apartment in Harlem. So he says, the bedroom door opens, my dad walks out, bleary-eyed. I snap my laptop shut. I realize this makes me look like I was watching porn or something, but my dad doesn't notice. He's got on his white collared shirt and tie, jacket hung over his arm. His gray hair is balding, and his frame seems to get thinner every year. Hey, kid, he says, since he still has a hard time saying my name. My dad and I haven't seen each other in 3 days. The program is basically an away summer camp, but set in the city instead of the woods. Most of the other students stay on campus in the dorms for an immersive creative experience, as St. Catherine's likes to say. And since classes are right down the street from Ezra's apartment, I try to stay with him as much as possible. My dad, however, said that he wants me here with him. I argued that it's important for me to gain life skills before college and get used to the idea of living on my own, which was only half bullshit. So we agreed on a compromise. I'd spend some days with Ezra and some days at home. Basically, I've been living the dream. Not many teens get a chance to actually live without adults before college. Did you grab any food yet? My dad asks as he walks over to the plastic takeout container. Nope, I say, opening my laptop again and jumping onto Instagram to see how many likes my food porn post of mangoes got. 2 so far, one from Ezra, the other from Ezra's fake account. How are things? My dad asked, mouthful of macaroni and cheese. How's Ezra? You've been eating well and going to bed at a reasonable time and doing your work and everything, right? I hesitate. I don't think he'd like to know that we've been staying up until 3 a.m. smoking weed, or that I'm still struggling to get my shit together. He keeps going. I'm trusting you to be responsible. You know that, right? And then, shit, God damn it. The cat pissed everywhere again. I help him grab paper towels to sop up the mess while he mutters something about needing to take Captain to the vet. And I say Captain's probably just anxious. She's never liked this new space. We can't open the only window, and there's no balcony, no fire escape, nowhere to sit outside. I understand. I feel pretty trapped in this apartment too. My dad points at the roll of paper towels in my hand and says my name to get my attention, but not my real name. He says my old name, the one I was born with, the one he and my mom gave me. The name itself, I don't mind that much, I guess, but hearing it said out loud, directed at me, always sends a stabbing pain through my chest, this sinking feeling in my gut. I pretend I didn't hear him until my dad realizes his mistake. There's an awkward silence for a few seconds before he mumbles a quick apology. We never talk about it, how he doesn't like saying the name Felix out loud, how he'll always slip up and use the wrong pronouns and not bother to correct himself. How some nights when he's had a little too much whiskey or beer, he'll tell me that I'll always be his daughter, his little girl. I didn't expect this to hit me so hard. I thought this was just going to be a quick little fun read. I'm starting to get emotional. I put the paper towel down and take the 10 steps into my bedroom, closing the door behind me with a soft click. I'm going to stop there. I'm getting super emotional. Maybe that wasn't the best quick 3 pages to read.
But it was real, right? And names are so real. And these little things that just, it's the little slice, the little slice, the little slice. And that's why it, like, you don't think like, oh, it's not going to bother me to read it. And then you're like, right, that's cutting at the same wound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think it's different. Like, I don't think that's actually the part that I meant to read. I meant to read a section that was a little bit more about Felix discussing like what his journey was to discovering himself. But I started a few pages earlier. So I don't think I've actually read that section out loud. And I think that it's different to write it. It feels more like healing, but to say it out loud almost feels like I'm going through the same trauma again. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it feels like I'm kind of living it with Felix instead of just kind of like writing it out. So
it totally makes sense because like I do a lot of reading aloud while I'm writing and while I'm editing, but I can sort of like breeze through the hard parts and kind of half read them. But when you're saying the words, yeah, no, I had a scene that I read that, and after I read it, I announced I will never read that scene out loud again. The scene where like the mom does something hurtful to her trans kid that she doesn't have any idea how hurtful it is. I'm like, I don't want to have to read that out loud. I don't want to have to go there. So thanks for going there with us. You don't ever have to do it again.
It probably won't. I'll flag those pages that do not read.
But it made me change what I want to read because I want to play more. I want to talk more about names and pronouns. So my book is Rick. It's backwards, I'll bet, but I'm very happy with the cover. And it is about Rick, who's right here. And he is a cisgender boy. And he's gotten into 6th grade, and his best friend is, frankly, a jerk. And it is a companion to Melissa's story, which is my first book. And Jeff is the bully to Melissa. And Rick is in the background, not being helpful, but not stopping it, but also not instigating it. And when he gets to junior high school, there's more options. And in fact, there's a Rainbow Spectrum, which is an LGBTQIAP+ group of ferocious 6th through 8th graders. And if you've ever been to middle schools in the last couple of years, like, these kids really do talk like this. Some people are like, oh my goodness, they don't all use this language. Oh yes, they do. They dive into it. They swirl in it. They try things on and try different things on, like Felix did, like we did. Probably, I know I did, but when I was older and had access to the language. But younger kids are just doing it. So, I'm going to read sort of from that first meeting of the Spectrum Club where they're doing their go-round. And Rick is worried about his turn, and he's listening to how some of the other kids talk. The circle continued around him. I'm Layla. I'm in 6th grade, and I use she and her. And I don't really know yet, but I've been doing a lot of reading and thinking, and I might be bisexual. Then it was Melissa's turn. Rick wondered if she would tell everyone. He decided that he wouldn't if it were him. Hi, my name is Melissa, and I use she and her. I'm in 6th grade, I'm Kelly's BFF, and my connection to the community is that I'm a transgender girl. Oh, yeah, said Green. Melissa gave Green a thumbs up. Green introduced himself as non-binary earlier. And it's not a secret, but it's also my information to share. So I'm happy for all of you to know, but please don't tell people outside of this room. So, asked Mika, what was your name before? That, Melissa paused, is none of. None of? Yeah, none of your business. Melissa shared a high five with Kelly. A few kids chuckled and the theater kids laughed out loud. Good one, Melissa, said Mika. Sorry I asked. Kelly went next. Hi, I'm Kelly Arden. I'm straight, but I'm a proud ally. Not to be harsh, said Zoe, but ally isn't really an identity to be proud of. And you're new, but we talked about this last year, and we don't use that word as a noun here anymore. Allying is something you do, not someone you are. Then what's the A for in LGBTQIAP+, asked Kelly. Asexual, said Zoe. A few kids nodded, but others looked confused. Asexuality is when you don't have any interest in ever doing the deed with anyone. The word asexual buzzed in Rick's head like a fly, looking for a place to land as introductions continued around the room. His stomach felt tingly, not nervous exactly, but not calm either. More like drinking soda too fast and having the bubbles dance around inside his body. Rick's turn was only 2 kids away, and then 1. I'm Sam, said the kid next to Rick. I'm so glad this group exists. I'm in 7th grade, and my pronouns are they and them. That made it Rick's turn. Hi, I'm Rick. I'm in 6th grade, and I'm a he. He might have stopped there, except that everyone was looking at him to continue, which both made Rick feel like he needed to say something and made it harder to talk. I'm just here to check things out. Welcome, Rick, said Mr. Sidney. This is a great place to explore.
I really love that.
What was that?
10,000%. I said I really love that. And I think you're 10,000% right. Like, I went to a series of LGBTQ writers in schools programs with Lambda Literary and met with a lot of like GSA, Gender and Sexuality Alliance groups. And they are just, the students, the young people, they are at the level of like vocabulary, I think that's a good word that you used earlier, of where I was when I was like my last year of college. And even then, maybe even like after college, and I still hadn't even known what non-binary was until like I was 25. And that's something that is just common knowledge, I think, you know, for a lot of young people.
Right. I mean, it's not true for everyone. There's still certainly plenty of kids who are in difficult places, who don't have access, but there are A kids who know about these things. And like I found the word genderqueer when I was 19, and I swallowed it. Like I had never heard of it before. So to have kids now using language just fluently out of their mouth that only really came into fashion in the last few years, whatever that means, and that they're just already there because they're picking up language now. All of the things are new.
Yeah. So that makes me kind of wonder about, you know, Melissa's story published 5 years ago now. Yeah. Felix is published this year in 2020. And even just kind of like talking about how things were different for us when we were younger versus now. And for how things are different for a lot of young people now with like access to this info. I'm interested in what your take is on the differences for authors. Like, do you feel like things have changed in the last 5 years from Melissa's story to your newest book, Rick? Do you think that there's more pushback or less pushback or more acceptance or less acceptance? Like, what are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts? So 5 years ago, I don't think that we could say that there was a trans kid lit field. Just like 5 years ago, I think there were a couple YA books that we could name, mostly from smaller imprints or specialty presses and things like that. But I mean, until Meredith Russo, who is, I think, also 2015 or 2016, right in that same era, like, there were a few books, and they were mostly written by well-meaning, nice white cis ladies. So
Yeah.
right, so like, I think there is a big difference in that my first book got a lot of press, in large part because there wasn't a whole lot to compare it to. So it was like, wow, look, you can write a book with trans characters. And then everyone went, oh, look, you can write a middle grade book with trans characters. And so now I think there are not nearly enough of them. I think most of the published trans authors are YA, not middle grade. A couple of picture book, and they're mostly white, and they're mostly able-bodied, and so it's like we're at the very tip of the iceberg. But I do think that we are starting to chip, and that
Yeah.
the chipping will continue.
Yeah.
I mean, because you were in publishing before you were published. How does it feel different to you?
Oh, while I was in publishing, I didn't see very many submissions, and I actually started to transition when I was there. So that's a whole other story. That was a whole other journey. But because of that, I think that I did start to see more submissions where people were like, oh, well, you are trans, you're non-binary, maybe this story will interest you. So I did see like maybe 3 total. But the thing is, with publishing, I think that a lot of conversations are starting to happen now about how much of publishing as a kind of like team, because it's so many different people, can kind of like get in the way of diversity. Even if there's one person they're pushing for it, it has to like push through sales, it has to push through publicity, it has to push through like all these different teams that aren't always going to be behind it. So, without saying too much, I feel like I actually do kind of wish I'd pushed harder for one particular story that I did like, but it didn't make it past the editorial team, for example. Like the editorial team wasn't as interested in it, so I wasn't able to push it to the next step. In retrospect, I really wish I'd been like, I don't care, this is a really good book and I'm going to like push it through. Yeah, and I think the other 2 submissions I saw were towards the end of my time there, when I kind of had the sense I was going to leave. So I was like, maybe I'm not the best editor to take this on. But I think there are more stories out there. I think that your story, I think Mason Deaver, I think Meredith Russo, I feel like a lot of authors out there have like paved the way for a lot of other authors who are coming up. Like the number of authors that are coming out with books next year alone is like mind-blowing to me.
Right? Like, no,
Yeah.
we very quickly went from a space where I could be the only trans person on a panel about trans kids lit to there can be a panel of all trans people and I don't find out about it until after it happened. Like, I love that. I love not being the only one. This is great. Peers are the best.
Yeah.
But I think to your point about the so many places where it can get cut off is where intersectionality plays a role. So if the white cisgender, maybe a couple of gay, like in a very business suit gay kind of way, can read a book about a white trans middle class kid who wants to be in a school play and go, oh, I just have to shift one button and this makes sense. Whereas Felix is right. There are people who are going to be like, this is too much and I can't. And there have been people who have been told, we can't publish this because it's not realistic because there's too much going on.
So
like,
many
wait, my
people.
whole life is too much. My life, not my life, but like this person's life, their actual existence, how they live in the world is too radical for you to conceive of reading about.
Yep. And that's something
Yeah.
even outside of Felix, like, I have a lot of thoughts swirling through my head where I kind of want to ask, like, do you have to consider cis readers when you are writing your book? Because I do kind of feel like when I was writing Felix, I do say unfortunately, because I really hope for a time when I don't have to do this, but I feel like there were disclaimers throughout where I was kind of like, I know you're a cis reader. I know that you're white. I know that you're not going to get this. Here's why I'm going to need you to step back and just take in what Felix is saying. Like, I had several moments like that throughout. And I think that that's partly why it's been accepted a lot more in comparison to, even though Hurricane Child won the Stonewall, kind of like commercially, readers, there have been many more readers who will say there's just so much going on. There's racism, there's colorism, there's sexism, there's homophobia. It's like, yeah, welcome to my life.
The thing is that I'm biased because my heart is in middle grade, but that's still my favorite of yours, is Hurricane Child, because it does go a lot of places. It does take into account a lot, but in a way that is laid out. Like it just that's the story, right? This is her story, and if you're gonna keep reading the same story over and over and over again, you could just get one book. Like, I think they call it the Bible. But if you're gonna read different books, then read different books.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I kind of want to ask, like, I've had to like shut myself down a few times, but I honestly want to ask people sometimes, like, don't you just get tired? Just don't you get so tired of reading the same like white straight cis books over and over again? Don't you just get so bored?
Well, that's part of why so many people don't read. Many people don't read because if they don't get access, right? Like, why would you read books about that aren't about you or things that you care about or know about or anything? But the question about thinking about cis readers, I'm not very good at. Well, cis adults, I do not give an F about whether cis adults understand or get my book. Don't care. I have 3 groups I care about. Trans kids and gender expansive kids, for sure. Cis kids, because we need tools. No one's showing them, of course they won't know. So of course. And then there's trans and genderqueer, non-binary adults who need these books now because we didn't have them growing up.
Yeah.
And if a cisgender adult also happens to read my book and get something out of it, well, aren't you lucky? Like, wasn't that nice for you? Look, you can adapt to that too.
I love that. I want to get to that place. I think that especially after seeing what I honestly think is like a lot of racist pushback for some of my past books, I think that it's just a constant thought in my head of, yes, I wrote this specifically, like I wrote Felix Ever After specifically for Black, queer, trans, and non-binary readers, but I have to think about the white, cis, straight gatekeepers who are going to say that this book is not good and not give it to the people who I really want to have it.
Right.
So I think that's the constant like struggle of trying to balance between making sure I explain to them, this is why this story is important. Please don't try to gatekeep it. And then actually like see it flourish in the hands of the readers who I really wanted to have it in the first place. Yeah, I don't know if you are okay with harping on the negative of like gatekeeping,
but the negative.
Do you want to talk about like negative gatekeeping experiences that you might have?
First, I would like, if you would allow me to give a thought from a white person on how race and transness plays out in publishing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of white adults who could imagine their kid coming out to them as trans. And so they can connect into that. And so they can say, oh, could be my story. Or there's someone in their family who has come out to them as gay.
Mm.
If they're a white family, their kid is not going to suddenly become black. And so there's like queer show up in all the families. And so the way a lot of this stuff breaks down is once you know someone, things change. And there's such a racial divide that causes class divide, that causes social divide. All of these things, racism being the insidious monster, like crowbarring shit apart, makes people feel like I can't connect to that.
Right.
That's my theory.
It's a correct theory. There's a lot that goes.
There's a lot of theories. They're all yeah. There's a lot. It's not just that. Yes. So negative. So I think that what I would like to complain about is, because you did ask me to complain, was not so much the gatekeepers getting in, and that's because of when I sent it out. I started writing Melissa's story in like 2004, and then it would not have been published, right? That would not have happened. You know, my editor has said, yeah, no, would not have happened. But by the time it got to them, they were looking for it. They knew it was coming. They were, right? Because that publishing is like a year and a half behind the curve, and 2015 was like the year of trans. So they wanted the thing to fit into the hole. So I got there real easy. But then the way people have talked about the book has been sometimes great, sometimes terrible. And one of the worst of them was from the New York Times. And hey, let's trash talk. Why not? So first of all, they introduced me and said that my honorifics is mix, but did not use it. And instead of the New York Times standard is always to call people by the honorific and last name. That's what they do, unless they're trying to protect your identity. There are multiple people in the family that they're talking about, or if they're talking about a kid. So they infantilized me, called me Alex, because they couldn't handle an honorific that didn't match their standards. So they talk about my gender wrong. That's one thing. They misgendered Melissa in an A1 front page article. They used the wrong pronoun. It wasn't just like boy who thinks there. It was also actually misgendering. And when I called them on it, they said it's because they did not want their audience to be confused. And to this date, they have not issued a correction.
Wow.
They issued stupid corrections about 1925 when Miss Virginia Wolseley of, 17 Belvedere Lane, blah, blah, blah. But they won't acknowledge that, which sucks.
Wow. I did not know that. That is... I have a similar story with Kirkus reviews for Felix Ever After.
You did.
I made a very big stink about that one because they have a history of hurting marginalized people, and I feel like we still to this day kind of like uphold them as like, oh my God, I got like the Kirkus star, but then they also will go and be completely transphobic, completely racist, and they did something similar where they, first just kind of had like a subversive transphobic review. I don't really want to go into the details, but basically called like the pain of transphobia exhausting. And then went on to use like really incorrect terminology for Felix's identity. And they went and changed all of the incorrect terms when they were called out on it online, but they never had it as a correction. They never said we made a mistake. They just changed it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not taking any accountability. So for their, this is kind of like almost a more insidious way of gatekeeping, where anyone who might have seen those terms and realized, oh, Crowdcast has absolutely no idea what they're talking about, I am not going to listen to their review, will now not see that, but will instead see the subversive transphobia, which is subversive. So they might be influenced by that.
And everyone else is going to go, oh, these are what the terms are. Crowdcast did it. They know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's some negative stuff. I mean, I don't want to be all negative, but there's a lot to be negative about.
Yeah. I mean, we do tend to try to mix our, there's transphobia in Felix, but I do try to like balance it with joy and kind of end with like a feeling of hope in the story.
That's my goal. My goal is the optimistic side of realistic.
Yeah. Yep.
It has to be something that could happen, but it doesn't have to be the worst thing that could happen. And you can feel free to go, I don't want to talk about this at all. It's a choice in Felix to have him outed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a choice that a lot of cisgender authors make for trans people and do it really badly and without a point. So, like, do you want to talk anything about that, or are you like, that is so not interesting to me?
Yeah, I can talk about it. I think that I wanted to address real transphobia that people face. It is difficult to talk about, but it's something that happens. I get trolls sending me anonymous messages, like they're like Felix has sent messages. I haven't been outed, but people have been outed. And I think that I wanted to put, I had like two goals, I guess, where I wanted to put what it really feels like the real emotional pain on the page, to kind of validate what I feel and what other trans and non-binary people feel when they're hurt. It's not just something that we should just get over. It's really hurtful and harmful and painful and traumatic. So I wanted to put that on the page. And I wanted to also kind of offer like a blueprint almost of, well, I've been hurt. Not necessarily like you have to move on from it. I'm not saying that at all, but in the sense of like, what are possible next steps? So that was really my goals, especially with the messages that Felix got. Like every single time Felix got a transphobic message, I made sure that he or someone else would validate him and affirm him and say, this troll is wrong. All the trolls in the world are wrong. You are who you say you are. No one else has the power to say who you are. Fuck J.K. Rowling. That's slipped out.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to really like create that sense of affirmation and that sense of joy. And as many like painful moments as there were, I always made sure that a moment of like joy with friendship, with community followed. And specifically with the outing, Felix was outed publicly with like a gallery that showed his old pictures. And honestly, he wasn't really outed, but it was more like a sense of like invalidating who he was, and kind of like without his permission showing pictures that he didn't want anyone else to see. And I made sure that the book ended with like his own gallery where he got to show his self-portraits. Like, this is who I am. This is what, I want the world to know me as. So yeah, I wanted to create like those moments of pain, which are real, which I don't feel like we have to sweep under the rug all the time. I make the choice to not always write about them for my own reasons, but I did for Felix, to kind of also take those painful moments and create something joyful from them. That was a
Yeah.
long answer. I want to hear your answer.
No, but thank you for sharing that because I think that's real. Well, I think that's real, and I think that you need to have struggle in order to have plot. Right? You need to have problems in order to have plot,
Yeah.
and it's about how it gets responded to on the page. It's about, like you say, the moment of joy, about the moment of reclaiming, about the moment of reacting,
Yeah.
and providing the model also to the cisgender people of what can you do if your friend gets outed, what
Right.
felt
Yeah.
helpful and what just felt invasive. Like
Right.
that, I think that's probably also part of the difference between middle grade and YA. Because I wrote Melissa's story intending for her never to be outed. And in fact, in continuing in Rick, she is never outed on the page. The only people who know are people who she told. And that felt important to me because in part, going back to the question of writing for cis people, I didn't want cisgender people to see someone being outed as like, though that's just part of it. I wanted it to be that you can talk about someone without outing them. And you can hold information private without it being a secret. So that's where I went, but I think that's very much a an outlet of or an effective of being middle grade versus YA, because middle grade is about testing out new things and trying out new things and empathy and stuff. Where YA is about, okay, what about when the shit really hits the fan? And I think YA audiences want that and need that because it does happen.
Yeah.
That's my long answer. So there.
I really loved what you said about information can be private but not a secret. I feel like that is something that I wish our community in general would kind of talk more about. And maybe you can tell me like more about what you meant by that. The way I thought you meant it to mean was,
Well,
I feel like there's a constant sense like you have to be out, like you have to be out in order to be proud. You have to like tell someone that you're trans in order to be a proud trans person. You have to tell someone that you're queer in order to be a proud queer person. And I am so against that for so many reasons.
right? I mean, I have to say the line has Kyle Lukoff written all over it. I got it
You
from
said
him.
what?
Kyle
Oh.
Lukoff, who wrote Aiden when Aiden became a brother. He's also a librarian, so he works a lot with young children, and he is out at work, but also, oh, it's a Kyle. Hi, Kyle. He also is like, that's like, it's not a secret, but it's also my information to share. So, no, I don't want you to like whisper about me in the hallways, but also there's nothing freaking wrong with being trans. So, yeah, it's my not secret to share. It's just private. It's just fine. And I really do like that.
Yeah. I'm gonna start to use that. Yeah.
What else did we want to talk about before we get to questions?
I know I had like one more question for you, but there's like no smooth transition, so I'm just gonna ask it. I know that we were talking before about like next projects, and I'd love to hear more about what your feelings are on whether, we've been talking about cis readers all night, but whether you think cis readers and readers in general are ready to see a third person perspective book using they, them, or other neo pronouns.
So a couple of responses to that is, well, you're not ready for something you haven't seen. So in some ways, you can't be ready until we've done it.
Right.
So the fact that they're not ready is a reason to do it. Partly, there are some people who are ready and have been craving and needing that representation. And I am also writing a third person book, so the book is written in they, and I find myself making mistakes sometimes and like reverting to other pronouns because I'm not used to it in written form. Well, that's part of why I'm doing it, is to get more used to it. And since we're writing for kids, most people that we're writing to have read less than, maybe a couple hundred books? Like, depending on who they are, some of them are voracious, but they only have a couple years of reading experience. So if we can have them reading books young that include they as a pronoun and pronouns, they won't feel so weird to the next people. And I think, I don't think we can fully ever, maybe I'm wrong, I'd love to be wrong. I don't think people our age are going to all fully incorporate and grasp a single or even a set of pronouns that work and it's smooth going. I don't see that happening for us because we've just talked too much already. But for younger people, I think it is so much more possible if we provide it. So no, they're not ready. That's why we do it.
Oh, just got chills. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that. And you made me super excited to work on my project also. So.
Oh, good. I'm glad someone has some motivation. This is not here. It's been so hard. I posted to Twitter this morning. I have the writing focus of a, and then I pressed tweet.
That might be one of the most perfect tweets I've ever seen or ever heard.
That's all I had. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been hard. It's been hard.
It's been hard. And I think we're ready for questions now. Oh my goodness.
Hi, yes. So I actually want to start with the question that I have for you both. And that you both talked about gatekeepers in publishing, but I'm curious about what your experience was before you got to that point when you were finding your own voice as writers, and how you found readers who could support and affirm the stories that you wanted to tell.
Alex, do you want to go first?
Well, I always loved middle grade books. So once I did find the word genderqueer at 19 and was super out as queer and whatever language I was using at the time, I went to the queer bookstore and went to go look at the middle grade books to see what I could read, and there was nothing there. So I get that was just it should be there. And I don't see it getting to a regular bookstore, but I can always just make copies of it at a Kinko's, because back then, there were Kinko's. And so I guess I didn't really hit that gatekeeper, because I was so already immersed in queer community that I was I can get it to a couple of kids anyway. I don't know if your experience is, everyone's experience is different, but maybe it's radically different.
I think that I was pretty lucky because I had not started to, I think I started to question my identity right at the beginning of working on Hurricane Child. And I started to transition when Hurricane Child had either just come out or was about to come out. And I had also just worked on This Is Kind of an Epic Love Story. And This Is Kind of an Epic Love Story is my first YA, and it was a 2-book deal. And it was through writing about a cisgender, binary guy that I was kind of feeling out my own feelings about being a more binary guy versus being non-binary and kind of all that stuff. But I was never really very public about it. But because it was a 2-book deal, I was very easily able to tell my editor at Balzer and Bray, hey, I'm having this idea about this demi boy. And by then I had figured out my identity as a demi boy. And she was cool. She was yeah, she was into it. So I feel I had an easier time with getting Felix Ever After published for that reason. And it's kind of as you were saying before, I feel there's such a wonderful growth of trans and non-binary stories that I can't I'm not even going to finish that sentence, actually. I feel like I'm about to jinx myself. Jinx myself in the entire publishing world. I feel, I was going to say, I feel like I can't see anyone saying no just for the sake of the character being trans and non-binary again, but so naive and so optimistic.
It's artificial, but also you now have a name as one of the people doing this, right? So that's, I guess, a thing that I feel lucky because I transitioned and had my identity all roughly made sense of well before I was published. So I didn't have to do a name change on books. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. Whereas you have to see books sometimes and sign books that you're like, oh yeah, that was then.
Yeah. There have actually been really cool readers who will come up to me and they've like already scratched out the old name and like scribbled my real name atop. And I mean, the other side of that is there are people who still don't understand and they'll still use like my old name and still like use my old pronouns but luckily, like if it's online, I see most times people will jump in and be like, it's Kacen. They use they them pronouns. So,
how great is it that there's a team of vigilantes out there, cis vigilantes, who are ready to take down the mistakes. I love it. But and I know there are other questions, but I did want to point out that when we're talking about gatekeepers, there's gatekeepers before, there's gatekeepers in publishing, and then there's the gatekeepers after. Right? There's does the book get into the library? Does the book get into the bookstore? Is it shelved in the right section of the bookstore, or is it put in YA because it's scandalous topics? I have found my books in YA more times than I would like to count. And all like the soft censorship of well, I'm not going to choose this book for my read aloud because it's sensitive, and all of those things. Yes, absolutely. Trans people are very much in the crosshairs of that.
For sure. Yeah.
And that actually kind of ties in well with one of the questions here. Somebody, Charlie asked, do you ever feel self-conscious using queer vocabulary and labels in kids' books since people might complain about it? How do you feel about people's complaints?
My response to
my work gets called didactic sometimes, and I'm like, well, the thing is if anybody else had been showing kids this language, I wouldn't have to do it so didactically. If they had other access, I could just use the words and not have a whole session where everybody learns what the words are and try to fit it in seamlessly, which, I mean, the beginning session of an LGBTQ group is going to do that, so I can fit it in there, but it's work that I'm doing because you all didn't do your work, and now you're mad that I have to do the work you didn't do.
Yeah. And that reminds me of my experience with King and the Dragonflies, where there are a lot of conversations around the intersectionalities of being both Black and queer, and what that means for King. And I feel like I've heard people suggest or imply that those conversations were didactic also, but we haven't really seen those conversations very often in the middle grade space. So if you look back to the original middle grade books from like 50, 100 years ago, those were pretty didactic also.
Right? That's the thing. It's like we're writing to children. We're writing to kids who are learning about the world. Yeah. We're going to do some education. Our queer kids who aren't seeing themselves already. Yeah, we're going to do that work.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the little pop-up.
Here I come.
I love
it. So another question was going back to the third person book that you're talking about. Do you think that they, them, their pronouns are not the best option because of the fact that they refer to more than one person?
You want a case?
Well, no, I feel like those are the perfect pronouns. They're my pronouns. A lot of people use them. And honestly, I feel like I was writing a queer book the other day that had two men that use he, him pronouns. And there were plenty of times where I was like, wait, which he am I talking about here? Which him am I talking about here? And that is the same issue for pronouns across the board. So, yeah, I think that that's just the kind of excuse people will use to try to say they, them isn't realistic pronoun.
Shakespeare, Chaucer, Jane Austen. And when the last person gets in here, would you please have them close the door? If your brain did not explode when I said that, I just mentioned 3 people who used the singular they and then just used the singular they. I am really over the English teachers who are so convinced that it is so hard for their little minds. And the fact that their being right takes precedence over my feeling safe and respected is some bullshit that can fuck off. That's how I feel about it.
Whew.
Not to the particular person, just in general is how I feel about that.
Yes, somebody put in the comments that the Oxford English Dictionary traces the use of singular they back to 1375. So,
yeah.
And a question also from the same person who shared that, Mike Jung. Do you have any pie in the sky, I want it all career aspirations you're willing to share?
I'd love to co-write a book. No. No, I mean, some of it I have in that people are reading the things I say and it's changing their lives. That's kind of pretty high pie in the sky.
Yeah.
But, you know, a multi-million-dollar book deal and then also 3 other Black authors get multi-million book deals along with me and we all go buy houses, I'm in. Kacen, what do you want?
That's my answer is actually pretty much the same. Like I hit my goal for Felix already. Like I went in with Felix really wanting to help even just like one person figure out, kind of like help them on their gender identity in the way that like a character helped me figure out that I was non-binary. And someone messaged me and said that that book helped them, and I was sobbing for a good while, you know, and I feel like I hit my mark with that. And like most millennials, my dream right now is to buy a house so I don't have to keep funneling all my money into rent, so that I can feel stable and just focus on writing the best I can. That's all I want.
I hear you. I had someone came up to me at a book event and they had been to ALA, the American Library Association, and they had gotten an ARC of Melissa's story, and they gave me a hard copy of Melissa's story, and they said, 6 months ago you signed this out to my old name. I've transitioned in that 6 months. Would you make this out to me?
Oh my God.
Yes, I died. I died in that moment and was resurrected. In that 6 months, they had read my book and transitioned. And those 2 things are going to be linked in her mind forever.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
You know, that kind of makes me have a question for you, because I've had moments where I'm just like, I break down just like hugging and crying and sobbing with people. I cry very, very easily. And I'm like, has that been your experience also? Like just like a lot of tears, like when you're at a signing, someone comes and says, you changed my life. Like, how do you respond?
So I can't tell whether it's I'm not a good person or it's testosterone or what, but I don't actually cry a whole lot. And part of it is I think
you're a very good person. I have to interrupt and say that.
Thank you, Kacen. But like, I developed lizard skin real young. I developed I couldn't actually have sticks and stones break your bones, but words will never hurt me. I couldn't actually do that, but I could get into the idea of nobody else's opinion matters. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. Everyone else is just wrong, and I don't care, and I don't care, and I don't care, and I don't care. And I got that so thick
Yeah.
that it is sometimes really hard to hear when people care. And it's really hard to believe it. And it's really hard to acknowledge that it's actually happening
Yeah.
because it just thunks right off the armor. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is Tuesday. And then if I actually stop and go, holy fuck, this is Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just have a little time left, but I wanted to know if there's anything that you both wanted to say to librarians, to places, institutions like Center for Fiction and other places, on how you want them to help kids find your books.
You mean like where they can literally be found?
Yeah, or if there's anything that you would want to tell adults and people who work with children, like how to help people find the stories that they're seeking.
I have a couple. End caps are a beautiful thing. And end caps with read-alikes are a beautiful thing. Like if you liked this one, novel with a kid who I'm terrible at examples, but like pairing up a non-queer book with a queer book to be like, these books are similar. I think it's also great to have, I do not believe in having big rainbows on the books, because if the kid has to take it home to an unsafe space, that's awful. But you can put like a little index card in the book that has a rainbow on it so that you can remove it before they check it out, but they can get access. They can figure out where the queer books are. Those are two recommendations I have.
It's a beautiful idea. I'll never forget when the librarian also said that they make like a designated space in their library where basically it's like a safe, almost like hidden space where if you're not comfortable with anyone seeing you pull out a queer book, you can go to the library, or maybe it's like you can go directly to the librarian and say, I'm looking for this book, and they find like a way to give that book to you in like a safe way. Like I just love it when I hear all the ways librarians really go out of their ways to like make the space as safe as possible for their young readers.
One of the ones I love, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say one of the ones that I love is when the book will say in it, don't bother checking this book out, just put it back when you're done. So you don't have to go to the librarian with it.
Yeah.
You can just stick it in your bag, and they're like, this book is it's not gonna beep when you leave, just bring it back when you're done. And also, when they don't bring the book back, replace it. Replace it as many times as you need to, because it is where it needs to be.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've also heard so many librarians, I always love it when they say like, most of the books just don't even come back, and I just keep on buying the replacements because obviously the student really needed it.
Right? That is what part of the budget is to get kids reading books. That kid is reading that book like over and over again. We know that.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, I feel like the only thing I can think of is like also resources online for people to be able to find more queer books more easily, which would be LGBTQreads.com, which is run by Dahlia Adler, has like a great archive of queer books from like middle grade up to adult. And she has also like separated them by genre and by identity. So I really love that website. And then Ray Stove has the trans master list, trans and non-binary master list for both middle grade and YA. So I feel like those are two good resources to find like more books.
Good call.
Great. Thank you both so much. This has been an amazing event. I hope everybody buys your books and reads them and shares them. And please come back to the Center for Fiction someday when you can be there in person. We'd love to have you. And thanks everybody for coming tonight.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks.